DreamWorks, a studio that certainly exists. And about a year ago, I had a hyperfixation on their output for a bit, with me going as far as marathoning their entire filmography. At least until I got to Boss Baby. Then I stopped as Boss Baby drove me insane. But DreamWorks generally has one of the most fascinating filmographies of any animation studio, as it's all over the place in terms of quality. Like, you can have one year where they release a horrifying piece of shit like Monsters vs. Aliens, and then the next year they release How to Train Your Dragon. Speaking of which, How to Train Your Dragon. I generally couldn't think of a better way to introduce this movie, but does it need an introduction? Written and directed by Dina Ball and Chris Sanders, How to Train Your Dragon is one of the most critically acclaimed animated movies of the 2010s, and for good reason, because this is one of the most well-crafted animated films I've ever seen, with it also having the upside of being one of my favorite movies of all time, as this movie just clicks with me in a way no other movie can. And it feels strange saying this, as I first watched this movie only a year ago when I was a senior in high school, but I guess that's a testament to this movie's quality if it's able to make an 18-year-old guy who loves Neil Breen and shitty horror movies fall in love with it. And since this is getting the live-action slop treatment, I don't think there's a better time for me to give this movie a look. Also, I've gotten kind of bored of looking at shitty movies, so this will be a nice change of pace for me. So without further delay, let me show you what the definition of peak cinema is. We begin with the DreamWorks logo, and while it's the typical DreamWorks logo we all know, they managed to sneak Toothless in there, so this movie automatically gets a 10 out of 10. And through narration done by our protagonist Hiccup, we get introduced to Berk, an island in the Norwegian Sea which is inhabited by Vikings that are about as Scottish as the Demo Man from TF2. Hiccup isn't Scottish though, he's actually Canadian and voiced by Jay Baruchel, and he's the biggest loser on Berk and everyone hates him. Even his dad, Gerard Butler, aka Stoic, thinks Hiccup is a disappointment. But Hiccup isn't an idiot, as he's smart enough to make a doodad that's capable of bringing down an entire dragon, and he decides to use this doodad to take down a Night Fury, which is basically an MQ-9 Reaper in the form of a big flying lizard, and Hiccup actually manages to shoot it down, but because everyone hates him, nobody cares. So Hiccup goes looking for the Night Fury alone, which he eventually finds, and that Night Fury is this guy, Toothless. And if you couldn't tell, I really like Toothless. And after realizing he's still alive, Hiccup contemplates on whether or not to cut his heart out, with Toothless straight up resigning himself to his death. And it was at this moment, watching this movie for the first time, that I became two things. One was a soy jet going, "Oh wow, DreamWorks put this in a kids movie? This is like a big boy movie." And the other being that Danny DeVito meme, which mostly had to do with the music, as it's just so damn perfect here. Now thankfully, Hiccup doesn't horrifically murder this innocent animal, and Toothless repays the favor by screaming in his face. And I gotta say, those bagpipes that play when Toothless has Hiccup pinned go hard as hell. So Hiccup returns home that night and admits to Stoic that he doesn't want to fight dragons, but Stoic is like tough shit and forces Hiccup into dragon training. Now we get the first of several training scenes, and these are probably the weakest parts of this movie, and it mostly has to do with the characters. I don't think it's much of a hot take to say that the side characters in this movie are annoying. There are some exceptions, like Gobber's pretty dope with Craig Ferguson's voice definitely helping. Fishlegs is alright and is voiced by Fogel from Superbad, which kinda made me wish Michael Cera voiced Hiccup, but the twins fucking suck though, and it doesn't help that one of them is voiced by TJ Miller. Out of all the characters here though, Astrid is easily the most significant and probably the best, with her serving as the rival turned love interest. I think as a rival, she works decently well if they don't make her a completely one-dimensional asshole. And she has a decent arc where she learns to appreciate Hiccup and dragons. But she's kind of weak as a love interest. I very rarely care about romance subplots in movies, and despite my love for this movie, this is no exception. It just feels kind of forced, as it doesn't really become relevant until the end. Like, it's established that Hiccup has a crush on Astrid in the opening scene. That is brought up occasionally, but isn't really developed until one scene where Astrid falls in love with Hiccup. And then after that scene, it sort of falls back into irrelevancy. At least they develop it more in the sequels, but in this movie, it's just kind of there. As for these scenes as a whole, though, I wouldn't say these scenes are bad, as they're a decent way to exposition dump on how the dragons in this world work. Back to the plot, though, Hiccup almost gets his head blown off, with him checking out Toothless, and yup, there he is. Hiccup even draws him and discovers that Toothless is missing a tail fin, with this being enough to make him completely unable to fly. And when he gets back, he decides to look through the dragon manual to see if he can find anything on Night Furies. And lo and behold, there's nothing on Night Furies, with this leading to Hiccup pestering Gobber on Night Furies the next day, with this ending in Hiccup making an ass out of himself. So Hiccup is like, fuck it, I'll check out and study this Night Fury myself. So he goes to see Toothless for a third time, with him bringing over a fish to see if maybe he can get along with Toothless. And what follows is genuinely one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema. It's pretty simple on the surface, as it's just Hiccup and Toothless bonding for 5 minutes, but the way it's executed is so perfect. The things Hiccup and Toothless do and the way they interact in the scene go a long way, making the bond forming here feel real. And the music really helps too. Plus, it's a perfect proper introduction to Toothless as a character, and his personality is allowed to really shine here. His personality is very silly and gooberish, but he's also kind of ferocious with a little bit of spunk added on. I think the best way to sum up his personality is that he's basically a friendly house cat, but less lazy, and with a few extra brain cells. And it helps that they pretty much designed him to look like a cat too. Speaking of his design, yeah, that's perfect too. It's very expressive and adorable through his eyes and ears, but he also looks cool through his jet black scales, the large bat-like wings, and overall sleek body plan. It gives him a fairly unique look for a dragon that looks really cool without also feeling, for lack of a better term, edgy. And when you put the charming personality together with a perfect design, you get what is genuinely my favorite character of all time. Shocking coming from me, I know, but yeah, you genuinely cannot top this. So after this, with Hiccup now feeling comfortable around Toothless, he decides to make up for crippling Toothless for life by building him a new tail fin. And when he goes to put it on, he baits Toothless into letting him put it on with a bunch of fish. And lo and behold, the fin works, with this being followed by a montage where Hiccup and Toothless are learning to fly together, mixed with Hiccup using the knowledge of dragons Toothless gives him as a way to cheat in the ring. It's a pretty neat montage. Seeing these two bond and learn to work together is very compelling, and it helps that both of them are likable characters. Now, I already talked about me liking Toothless, so let's talk about Hiccup for a bit. He's your typical dorky protagonist, and I think that works really well. As yeah, he's incredibly awkward and knows jack shit about human interaction, but he plays off of Toothless really well. Plus, I really like his arc in this movie, with him going from the dorky loser everyone hates to the badass Steve Irwin Dragon Wrangler. Back to the movie though, once this montage is over, with Hiccup and Toothless now being able to properly fly together, they go for a test flight. And yeah, this is probably another one of the best scenes in this movie, and it mostly has to do with the music and directing. I know I've been gushing about the music in this movie a lot, but there's a reason for that, because this is genuinely one of the best film scores I've ever heard in any movie, period. I'm dead serious, this is on par with stuff like Lord of the Rings in my book. It sounds all grand and epic, which yeah, probably doesn't really fit that much with this movie as the scale isn't that huge, but who gives a shit, it sounds really good. And as for the directing here, the way it's directed makes this scene feel very thrilling. The best way I could describe it is to sound like an IGN reporter, because the directing really makes you feel like you're flying on Toothless. Also, the ending transition where Toothless shoots a plasma ball and it transitions to the next scene, that's neat shit. Oh, and the part after this is phenomenal too. So Hiccup and Toothless are eating on a rock they found, and these little fucks called Terrible Terrors waltz up and try to steal the fish they got, with Toothless stealing with one of them in the most casual way possible. I love it. This is why I love this movie. I don't care if it's cliched moments, cinema peaks with moments like this. And after this, we finally see Stoke again, where he talks to Hiccup about his success in the ring. And as a gift, he gives Hiccup a hat, which is made from his mom's breastplate. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, this part's kind of whatever. At least Stoke is pretty fun in this scene though. Now we get one last training scene where it's just Hiccup and Astrid. And with the power of the console commands Toothless unintentionally bestowed upon him, Hiccup was able to win with him being selected to kill a dragon. This pissed Astrid off so much that she confronts Hiccup over him doing suspiciously well, with this ending in her discovering Toothless. She tries to escape and tell everyone, but she's basically kidnapped by Toothless, so she doesn't speak up, with Hiccup trying to explain everything. But Astrid is too pissed to listen to him, so Hiccup decides to help Astrid on Toothless's back with them going flying, with Toothless initially deciding to take them for a spin. It's a pretty small and goofy thing that I probably wasn't even going to mention, but then I remembered one line Hiccup said and it gave me PTSD, with that line being, "Bad dragon!" Now you might be thinking, why do you have PTSD over a simple, meaningless line? Are you a big baby? Well, let me explain. So one time, I was showing this trilogy to the guy that I watched Cat in the Hat with, and this was over Discord. And for most of the call, it was just me and him, but occasionally a few other friends would chime in. And when we got to the bad dragon line, there was another friend on the call. And that other guy had to bring up the other bad dragon. You know, that bad dragon, the weird dildos bad dragon, yeah, that bad dragon. And I had lived happily not knowing bad dragon existed, until this fucker had to bring it up. At least it got me this Neato Toothless figure for Christmas, so all was forgiven. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, a whole new world, but with a dragon, and no singing. Yeah, that's pretty much what the scene is, and that's a compliment, as this is genuinely one of the most beautiful scenes DreamWorks has ever made, and this might come as a shocker, but the music is really damn good in this scene. So after flying around for a bit, Toothless and a bunch of other dragons are summoned by a big kaiju dragon called the Red Death. It's the closest thing this movie has to a villain, as it enslaves all the dragons to steal food for it, which is why the people of Brick have been having to deal with dragon raids. So after seeing the answer to, well, everything, Astrid wants to tell Stoic immediately, but Hiccup tells her not to as a way to protect Toothless, with Hiccup devising a plan to hopefully change everyone's hearts. It doesn't work, as Hiccup tries to tame the dragon he has to kill, and Stoic, being a little bitch, isn't having any of it. And after hearing Stoic throw a temper tantrum like the snowflake he is, Toothless runs over and bails Hiccup out, with him immediately being beaten and captured, with Stoic being quite upset about all this, with him berating Hiccup for using cheat codes. And during this argument with Stoic, Hiccup offhandedly mentions the fact that he's been to the nest and that Toothless took him there. So Stoic decides to use Toothless as a GPS to take him to the nest, despite Hiccup telling him that there's a really big thing at the nest, with Stoic disowning Hiccup for good measure. So now we see everyone preparing the ships, and this is another one of my favorite scenes. Musically, they bring the bagpipes from earlier back, and any piece of music in these films with bagpipes gets an automatic win. And I gotta give this movie props for doing the third act breakup right. This is an animated kids movie trope that has been done to death, where the main protagonists split up and it's usually over some bullshit argument, and they try to make you feel all sad and go, "Oh no, this is very sad. I hope they reunite in the end and create a much stronger climax." But here, our duo is just involuntarily torn apart, and the sad moment here feels genuine and earned. But Stoic and the other Vikings leave, with Hiccup, Astrid, and the annoying side characters being left behind. And after a quick pep talk from Astrid, Hiccup decides to take the dragons used in training to save everyone from the Red Death. As yeah, it turns out an army of Demo Knights doesn't put up a good fight against against a kaiju. What follows is a big action sequence where the gang tries to keep the Red Death distracted while Hiccup goes down to save Toothless. And while it's not the most impressive action scene out there, with 2 and 3 definitely being a lot better when it comes to action, this is still pretty decent. It's pretty neat how a lot of the exposition given to us in the training scenes actually comes back and has relevance. Basically a bunch of Chekhov's gun moments here, and it's really cool how they stick to the continuity. And while Hiccup is down trying to bust Toothless out, he almost drowns with Stoke saving him and breaking Toothless free. And after Stoke apologizes to him for being a little bitch, Hiccup goes up with Toothless to have a one-on-one fight with the Red Death, with them ultimately taking out and causing it to explode like a nuke. It isn't a total victory though, as Toothless's prosthetic fin catches fire, which leads to Hiccup falling off Toothless and Hiccup almost dying in the explosion. Toothless is able to save him though, or at least most of him. Hiccup fell into a coma and had to get a leg amputated. Now Toothless is waking Hiccup up from his coma, and it's probably one of the sweetest scenes in this movie, as well as being another one of my favorites. The bit where Toothless gets excited and starts jumping around when Hiccup wakes up, accompanied with that piano, is enough to make me misty-eyed. Plus, the shot where Toothless is helping Hiccup walk and it shows Toothless' crippled tail is really powerful. I gotta say though, the moment after this is a little corny though. It's fine enough starting off, with Stoic coming around on dragons. It's a nice conclusion to his arc in this movie. But then it's kinda ruined by Ashford kissing Hiccup and everyone going, ooh. That's a little cringe, but it's made up for when Gower gives Hiccup a brand new saddle and tail fin for Toothless, with the ending being a reprieve of the test flight music and Hiccup and Toothless going for a flight around town. It's a perfect way to end an almost perfect movie. Sure, I have some minor nitpicks that I've already expressed, but overall for me, this movie's about as perfect as you can get. Wrapping things up here, what more is there to say? Well, there might be more, but I genuinely can't think of anything else to say right now, and I don't want to spend another month with my thumb up my ass, constantly rewriting scripts and thinking of how I should format this video. Which, yeah, sorry this video took forever for me to make. It's kind of embarrassing that it did take so long because this video is only around 12 to 13 minutes long, but who cares? At the end of the day, though, it was a blast talking about this movie, as like I've said many times throughout this video, this is genuinely one of my favorite movies of all time, and we haven't even gotten to the rest of the trilogy yet, which is also phenomenal. But those are gonna have to wait, because if I tried to shove all these movies into one video, I think that would have unironically killed me. Other than that though, I don't really know what else there is to say. I guess I can mention the fact that I finally looked at something that I unironically enjoy. This definitely won't be normal, as I just don't really feel that confident about my ability to talk about stuff I unironically like, with this trilogy kind of being the exception because I feel passionately enough about these movies to want to make videos on them. But yeah, other than the other two movies in this trilogy, I don't plan on looking at anything else that's unironically good. Although considering how long this video took, those other two videos are going to have to wait. So next time, I'm going to return to my roots, to a certain brainius, if you will. I'm sorry for making that joke and reusing that laugh. Bye bye.